Welcome to the Circle Investor Real Estate Training Course.
This is your crash course on everything we think you should know before buying your first rental property in Indianapolis.
On today's course, we talk about
Is there such a thing as the right neighborhood for you to choose?
probably the most important metric to pay attention to when trying to decide where to buy or where to invest is appreciation.
Welcome to today's episode of the Real Estate Training Course. You've got myself, Ryan, and Stuart with you today. We're going to be going over the what goes into choosing the right neighborhood in Indianapolis. And I will say that title, is is already something that we can kind of talk about. Is there such a thing as the right neighborhood for you to choose? What do you think, Stuart?
I think that if you take a look at our investor map that we put together, I think it really highlights that there's so much diversity across all of Marion County. Like you could go from, and we'll get into this a little bit more in this episode, but there's B classes next to A classes and C classes next to A classes, and it really does depend where you are in the city because it bounces around so quickly from neighborhood to neighborhood. One of the most important notes I think you put in this outline was that it's not zip code by zip code like a lot of cities really are. It's really just neighborhood to neighborhood.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of variation in Indianapolis. We'll get calls from people who live in other markets, maybe markets like Southern California, for example, that really are almost more of a zip code by zip code market. Like this is a great zip code. This zip code not so much. And they'll ask me, so like, what are the good zip codes in Indianapolis to invest in? And, I'll kind of have to say there are A through D class areas within the same zip code. So it's hard for me to express, hey, this is a zip code that I would be investing in versus this one is a little bit different. I will kind of, speak to that. Is there any such thing as the right neighborhood a little bit? I think that every neighborhood has merit, and if you ask 100 people, you're going to get 100 different answers about one neighborhood in particular. There are positive things to say about every single neighborhood. But with that said, as an investor, you still have to be able to compare apples to apples, compare one neighborhood to another, and make an informed decision about which neighborhood you want to invest your hard-earned money into. And you want to be strategic in that process. So Stuart already mentioned our Indianapolis Investor Map. That's something that we put together a few years ago, and we've just been tweaking over the years. I will be the first to say that you could argue the finer points of this map. It is definitely something that we have put together to the best of our abilities to really try and show which neighborhoods people are competing the most to own real estate in versus which neighborhoods are just not as competitive and maybe are not as desirable. And really the main driver for what informs the rating, whether it's A class or D class, it really comes down to whether just what your access to amenities are in that area. So is the neighborhood characterized by high-end restaurants, by 4 and 5 star hotels? That's probably going to be an A class. If the neighborhood is characterized by a convenience store and maybe a couple of fast food chains, and it's a food desert, there's no nutritious restaurants or your access to good grocery stores, that's probably going to be like a D class neighborhood because it doesn't offer as much for what people want in the area that they live. So we can kind of get into it here. I've actually on my screen here, I have the Indianapolis Investor Map pulled up, and we'll try to share that with you guys. But as we go around here, you can see that we kind of have different areas labeled, and we can kind of get into how to use the Indianapolis Investor Map here in a moment. But just to kind of give you a preview of how it works, we built it on Google My Maps, and we can share a link. So I think there'll be a link below here on this video. where you can access it and view it on Google Earth. And kind of the reason we did that was so that people viewing the map can can kind of see street by street. You can see the landmarks that sort of separate one area from another. But before we get too in the weeds with the Indianapolis Investor Map itself, maybe we should get into a kind of an overview of what some of the reasons are to favor one neighborhood over another.
As someone who has lived in Indianapolis for a long time, probably the most important metric to pay attention to when trying to decide where to buy or where to invest is appreciation. There have been neighborhoods just in my lifetime in Indianapolis that have done a complete 180. I think of Fountain Square, and someone who bought a real estate investment property in Fountain Square, 15 or 20 years ago. It could easily have doubled in the time since. And while we don't have a crystal ball necessarily, I think when you have a solid, trustworthy agent, especially if you're out of state, that market analysis to kind of try to predict some of that appreciation is probably the most important thing you want to pay attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. I ran a little experiment here to sort of test that theory. Big caveat to this is appreciation rates are going to vary, from one year to the next, pretty significantly in different areas. So, this is not to say one area is better than another, over a long-term stretch. But just as an example, I pulled the average sales price from Hamilton County in October 2024, and I compared it with the average sales price in Hamilton County in October 2025. And then I did the same thing for Marion County. So Hamilton County and Marion County, if you don't know, if you're local to Indianapolis, you know these counties well because they're probably the two biggest counties in central Indiana. Hamilton County is kind of your northern suburbs, contains Carmel, Fishers, Noblesville, Westfield. Marion County is that's your downtown Indianapolis county. So that's going to include pretty much all of the major markets within downtown Indianapolis. From October to 2024 to 2025, we saw the average sale price change from $479, about almost $480K, to $558. So that's a 16.4% increase, which is pretty dramatic. That is fairly unprecedented for a lot of real estate markets, and even kind of beats many past years for Hamilton County itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then Marion County, that same time period. So if you had bought in Marion County in 2024, you versus Hamilton County, instead of getting a roughly 16% appreciation on the property you purchased, you would have seen your average sale price increase from $245,000 to about $248,000. So that's only about $3,000 in appreciation, representing a 0.89% increase. So less than 1% appreciation during that same period. So again, that's going to vary. Marion County and Hamilton County have, they've switched places for which is appreciating faster. Many of the years that I've been working in Central Indiana real estate, but it's just a good example of, this year-to-year appreciation, depending on location, can vary quite a bit.
For me, one of the key takeaways to that is the appreciation difference in Marion County, because Indianapolis is such a hot market for real estate investing. For those investors who feel like they missed out, or maybe it's too late, or they're hesitant to pull the trigger on an investment property, I think that fact highlights the reality of it's not too late. You're not going to be paying $25,000 or $45,000 more a year for an investment property in Marion County.
Yeah, it also highlights the importance of know the stats on the market, not just the general market you're investing in, but know the stats on the particular area within that market. And, is it an area like Hamilton County that has seen a 16% increase in the past year? Because you could theorize, well, maybe I think for XYZ reason that trend is going to continue, or you might feel like you're paying for somebody else's appreciation, and then you're going to see it flatline during your tenure as the ownership as the owner of the property. So you could kind of argue that either way. So something that's been more flat or more stagnant, I think in stock day traders call it like a trough, right? If you buy in the trough period, you might have more upside to your investment, and that's kind of what Stuart's talking about there with Marion County, potentially being in that position. But as we just kind of speak about this generally, it's not necessarily going to tell you that much, knowing that the greater Indianapolis area appreciated XYZ. If you're working with an agent that really understands how to work with investors, they should be able to pull those stats for you. If you're considering purchasing on the west side versus the south side, like what have the trend lines looked like for those two independent areas. Just a few other things to mention as far as reasons why you might choose one area over the other. Cash flow ratios are going to be different. So that tends to be a driver of investors' decision when it comes to buying real estate. In many cases, especially if you're going for a long-term rental, if I could buy a property for, let's say in two different areas, it's $200,000 either way, but one leases for $1,500 a month and the other leases for $1,800 a month. Well, if they're the same price, I'm probably going to take the $1,800 a month, and that's going to be dependent on location. And I will just say my general experience is those markets that have the best rates of appreciation also tend to have the lowest rental income to purchase price ratios, meaning so like it's like the inverse of that example we gave of Marion County's appreciation maybe wasn't so as hot as Hamilton County's, but a lot of people that bought in Hamilton County, if they went single family or even multifamily, maybe they were cash flow negative on that purchase, compared to there's people that were able to secure real estate in Marion County where they were cash flow positive from day one. So depending on what your goals are, that can be different. But another point to make real quick is cash flow growth. That's not the same as your day one cash flow ratio. So cash flow growth tends to follow the same trajectory as appreciation. So as properties grow in value, so does the rent in those areas. So just to put in that same example, maybe that property you bought that was leasing at $1,800 and you paid $200,000 for it. Maybe it's that's a really good ratio on day one, but 2-3 years from now, maybe it's still leasing for $1,800 on the market, or maybe it's only slightly increased to $1,850 or $1,900. Meanwhile, that one that you bought that was $1,500 and you paid $200K for, maybe it was in a slightly better area, maybe a B class versus a B class versus a C class. Now that property is leasing for $1,700-$1,800 2 or 3 years later, and you have a property that's appreciating more. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of evaluate, and I think that's the point we were trying to make there.
Completely agree. You want to dive into the investor map tool?
Yeah, so we can kind of get into the map itself here, and how we've developed it, and really I want to use this time to kind of show you what I would recommend taking away from this map. So when we created this map, we really did so, and our mindset with it was, what would I want if I was new to Indianapolis, if I was new to this market, and I was trying to understand just the lay of the land, and I wanted a local level of knowledge. So that's really what we're trying to give with this Indianapolis investor map. So it has ratings of everything A through D class. So some examples of A classes would be like Zionsville, the heart of Broad Ripple, Chatham Arch, Miles Square, kind of on the east side, your Cottage Home neighborhood, the Canal, Meridian Kessler. Like, these are probably all of the even as an out-of-state investor, or somebody who's not local to Indianapolis, these would probably be all the neighborhoods that you've heard about on any HGTV show that's been made about Indianapolis. Like if you've heard the name and you don't live in Indianapolis, chances are it's an A class, or at least like an A/B. And that's another thing to point out is we have not only A, B, C, and D class areas, we actually have half steps in between. So some neighborhoods are rated as a A/B, some are B/C, some are C/D, which you could essentially mean the same thing as like A- or B+. So they're half stepped down, which only provides more nuance to help you understand, maybe more from a heat map kind of perspective, to help you understand kind of where those transitions happen from a more of a hot area to a less desirable area. Kind of to show you that breakdown. The east side is always a perfect is a really good area to show the example of how much variation you can see from one area to the next. I mentioned kind of your Cottage Home, Arsenal Heights, Holy Cross neighborhood. That neighborhood right up against I-70, it's a total A class. I mean, this is walkable or bikeable to a ton of really great amenities, both downtown and kind of your Mass Ave area, which those neighborhoods would be like Chatham Arch and Lockerbie. But there's also a lot of amenities now, even right within that Cottage Home and Arsenal Heights area. And as you head east from there, things kind of start to transition toward, more of just a moderately desirable to even less desirable areas. And again, a lot of this is driven by what kind of access to amenities do you have? What if you were looking on a site like Redfin, it might be the walk score, right? So like how easy is it to walk to different areas that are that you would want to be. So you have kind of some B/C areas like Willard Park, St. Clair Place is kind of in between. It's a class B. But you get out to kind of Englewood and Tuxedo Park. These are more like C class or C/D. So they're areas that do attract investors because the cash flow ratios are really good. But they're sort of food deserty, so they're not as desirable. But even when you get back out to Irvington, which is you might just intuitively think, oh, the farther I head east, the less desirable it gets, which is kind of true until you get to Irvington, where there's a lot of historic homes and there's a commercial corridor, and they've got a Starbucks and a couple of breakfast restaurants and bars, and like there's a brewery there. So that kind of speaks to some of the nuance that this map shows you.
And those neighborhoods are also key attractors for the city and their development plans, their infrastructure plans.
Yeah, absolutely. And development is a big driver of how much a neighborhood can change over time. So that's something we try to highlight on the investor map as well. We show you where major sort of institutions are, like where Eli Lilly is located, where Salesforce is located, IUPUI. We show you where the Motor Speedway is, where Penske is actually doing a lot of investment into downtown Speedway. There's a lot of this kind of development going on, and that is something that if you're an investor in Indianapolis, you would definitely want to know about. Because that might inform your decision on inform what you think about the trajectory of that area.
There's two approaches that we're highlighting here. There's diversification and concentration. You want to go a little bit deeper into each one of those?
Before we get into that, just one final thought with the map here. I do want to kind of mention paths of progress and understanding kind of what that term means, as that is something that you can really, having access to an investor map like this. It's not a perfect science, but this is where kind of the art of real estate investing comes in. You could kind of look at a particular area. I think a good example would be this Englewood area. It's an area that has sort of historically not been the most desirable, but if you look, it's surrounded. It's like a C/D that is surrounded by, by B classes and A classes. So, what are the odds that the city is just going to continue to pour investment into this area, and it's going to eventually envelop that area and cause it to develop in a positive direction? So that might, but that's today, because of the desirability of the area, it might be it might be more affordable to invest in that area. So that could be a good reason to purchase a property, in an area like that, because it could be in a path of progress. The same might be said of, kind of your Crown Hill area or Mapleton Fall Creek. These areas sort of in Midtown Indianapolis, they're sandwiched between Broad Ripple and the near north side, which are two very desirable areas. So what are the odds that kind of path of progress continues through those areas that presently are not the most competitive to purchase real estate in? So just wanted to say a few words on that path of progress subject.
So we have highlighted a couple different approaches to investing here: diversification and concentration, where you can kind of scattershot your investment ideas across the whole city and maybe place your bets in different areas and different classes of neighborhood. And then there's concentration, where it's the opposite approach, where you attempt to blitz the market in a particular level of neighborhood. So you want to go a little bit deeper into those?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a good overview. So with diversification, you kind of think of that as like you're hedging your bets. This is there are pros and cons to it. An advantage would be that you are kind of diversifying your risk across multiple areas. If you're sort of not sure, and you could be looking at our investor map saying like, well, there's 7 different B classes that I'm interested in, and I'm not really sure which one I think is the one for me. And there's ways you could kind of narrow it down, but if you're like, I want to make 7 investments anyway, and there's 7 neighborhoods I'm interested in, you could buy in each of them, and then you're kind of spreading your risk across multiple markets, which is kind of the other advantage to that is you're getting to experience more of the market in general, and you're getting a better understanding of sort of the nuances of different areas. But the cons to that approach is it limits your ability to kind of influence the local area, and also kind of limits your ability to build strong relationships with service providers, especially if you're investing, over an hour from, apart drive-wise from one area to the next, because you might not have the same service providers. You might have a great property manager in one area that doesn't serve the other area you're trying to invest. And that can definitely be true of contractors if you're trying to do value-add investment. It can be difficult to find contractors that are going to want to drive that far for a job, or maybe they will, but they're not going to give you really a great price because they're factoring in how far it is from where they're based. So there is something to be said for concentrating, which is kind of the other approach, because it's kind of the inverse of those pros and cons. The upside to concentrating is it does allow you to really, impact like take, for example, one particular street. Let's say it's a C-class area, and let's say there's 20 homes on this street, and you're planning on buying 10 homes as your investment. If you bought 10 homes across the city, well, then you're not really impacting, not making a huge impact on all those areas you're investing in. But if you bought 10 homes on the same street, I mean, which is very hard to do. It's not like those 10 homes are just going to hit the market.
Your best bet to land a deal like that is to buy someone's entire portfolio.
Maybe a portfolio. I was kind of thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you could somehow buy a concentration of homes, on the same street or even within the same block, the impact you can have on just the desirability of that neighborhood can be very significant. If you take a bunch of boarded up homes and all of a sudden make them, add value to each of them and make them desirable properties, that's going to really be a good synergy with what you're doing. Not to mention that the same thing is true of that contractor and service provider thing. If you are operating within the same small area, You're going to be able to build great relationships with service providers in that area. But of course, the downside is you are kind of putting all your eggs in one basket.
Mm-hmm.
So if for whatever reason that neighborhood stays pretty stagnant and doesn't have a lot of positive growth, like that's where the whole of your investment is. So you're just less diversified, and you're also, your experience is being affected too. You're just experiencing that one area instead of really getting more of a holistic experience for the market in general.
I think this speaks to our previous episode where we are encouraging investors to come visit Indianapolis, tour several properties throughout the city, make it personal, like actually go onto these streets and into these neighborhoods that you're planning on investing in, so you can get not only a feel, but you can meet some of the people. Like some of the best advice I ever got from a real estate agent was to not just visit the house, but to go visit the whole neighborhood, figure out where you're going to be grocery shopping, where you're going to be getting gas. That's the best advice we could give here too.
Even if you are, this training is obviously meant for investors and you're not necessarily going to be living in this property, but I give that advice to investors all the time. Like, imagine you are, put yourself in the position of, the people that you're going to be trying to lease the property to. Try to imagine, like, okay, yeah, where, what school would my kids go to, or where would I, where would I do my grocery shopping, and where would I go grab coffee, and all of those things. Picture yourself living in that neighborhood, and if you're like, man, I can't see it, like that means that if you're trying to lease to somebody who's anything like yourself, they're not going to be able to see it either. So it's when in doubt, go with your gut. So I mentioned that example of if you're trying to choose between 7 different neighborhoods. Like if you've come out and you've seen all of those neighborhoods in person, it's probably going to be a lot easier to, if all of the stuff on paper is kind of the same, you'll be able to make that decision. Just, I feel like I'm leaning this way for XYZ reason. And it's okay for that to be a little anecdotal.
Right. And just to touch back on your point about 1% appreciation in Marion County, choosing the worst neighborhood is better than not investing at all.
Yeah, 100%. And that is just to say, like, don't get hung up on trying to make the perfect decision. I've been doing this so long. I've seen so many investors get hung up with analysis paralysis. I've been working in Indiana real estate since 2018. In 2019, the median home price was just over half of what it is now. And it is it's continuing to appreciate, and market forces are pushing it in that direction. So all of the people that just kind of got intimidated by the type of decision it was, like, they could have had almost 100% appreciation in the past 5 years if they had just pulled the trigger on something. So that is kind of my last word of advice is, don't get too hung up trying to make the perfect decision. Like, if you are using any of these resources and making a somewhat informed decision, you're already steps ahead of many of your investor counterparts.
Well said. I think that's enough for today.
Yeah, that's it for today. Come back for another episode. If you learned something from today's course, please give us a 5-star review on Spotify and like the episode, and subscribe on YouTube. That really helps us out.
If you think someone you know could benefit from the things you've heard today, please share it with them.
You can check out our full library of episodes and courses wherever you get your podcasts. If you have any suggestions for future topics, please shoot us an email at thecircleinvestorpod@gmail.com.
That's it for today, but join us next time on the Circle Investor Real Estate Training Course.